Hello and welcome to this video on final versus static in Java. In this video, we'll be seeing about what is final keyword and what is static keyword and the differences between them. To understand them better, we'll be using some coding examples and providing you the difference. So let us dive into the topic. Final keyword is used in different contexts. First of all, final is a non-access modifier applicable only to a variable, a method, or a class. Following are different contexts where final is used. While the static keyword in Java is mainly used for memory management, static keyword in Java is used to share the same variable or method of a given class. The users can apply static keyword with variables, methods, blocks, and nested classes. So first, final access modifier. Final access modifier is a modifier applicable to classes, methods, and variables. If we declare a parent class method as final, then we can't override that method in the child class because its implementation in final, and if a class is declared as final, we can't extend the functionality of the class. That is, we can't create a child class for that class. That is, inheritance is not possible for the final class. So what do I mean by that? In this coding example, we have a superclass P and it has two things, first name and surname, as two methods, and it prints certain names accordingly. Then we have a class 2 called test main and it extends our superclass P. So we use method overriding and have the same class surname, and instead of Trivedi we have Sharma. Then we have our public static void main where we print a random word GFG. So in this coding example, if you see, we have a superclass and we extend that superclass to our test main, and our test main has a method overriding function called surname of the superclass, and it replaces a different statement. At last we have a public static void main where we print a message. So when I normally try to run this code, let's see what happens. As you can see, our main println is printed because from our main function we aren't using any of these functions. So now what I'm going to do is, as I said before, if I make a superclass final, I can't perform inheritance. So final class P is declared now. This means that I cannot inherit my characteristic of P inside my test main. If you see, there is an error occurring. The type test main cannot subclass the final class. So whenever I declare the word final for my class P, I cannot inherit in my main class. So why do we need to perform the final keyword? In real life, sometimes there might be cases where inheritance is not required and it doesn't actually make sense. So in those cases, when some class is modular and kept separate, we use this final keyword. So the main advantage of final keyword is that we can achieve security and we cannot provide unique implementation. So the main disadvantage of final keyword is we are missing the benefits of OOPS concepts like inheritance, polymorphism, etc. So coming to polymorphism. Polymorphism nothing but method overloading. So we were able to perform method overloading in our main function because method overloading is applicable and we can perform polymorphism. But if you do not want that to happen, you can make your method also final. So what it does, our extended function cannot override the method function from the, if you see the error clearly. So when do we perform these tasks? We perform these tasks when method overloading doesn't actually make sense. So if you're using any keywords like final, for example, for my class, I need to use certain inputs. So I need to import java.io dot star. So all the modules of java.io would be used, and then I would be using java.util. These are some inbuilt packages that are available in Java, and for me to use these final methods, I need to import these values. So this is another case. The last case is having a final keyword to any of the variables. So if I have a variable int a equal to 50 and I do not want to change the value of a further by like making a equal to 20, what I do, I initialize final before my integer variable. So what happens whenever I try to change the value of the a, it is providing an error saying that we cannot have final local keyword a be assigned because we are changing the value. So where would this be useful? This would be useful in cases where like a constant value, for example pi value is 3.14567. so in those cases we do not want the value of pi to change, so I'll assign these constants with the word final. So the next part that we'll be looking at is static access modifier. Static access modifier is an access modifier that is applicable for methods and variables but not for classes. We can declare top level class with a static modifier, but we can declare the inner class as static, such as inner classes known as nested classes. In the case of instance variables for every object, a separate copy will be created, but in case of static variable, a single copy will be created at class level and shared by every object of that. So let's see this example to understand them better. Here we have a class test main and two variables initialized, static int x 10 and int y 20. So this is an instance variable and this is a static variable. So what we will do, we'll create an instance of this class once, test main t1 equal to new of test main, and what we'll do, we'll assign values of t1.x some values and t2.x some values. So these are the values of t1.x and t2.x. So what we'll do, we'll try to create another instance of test main t2 equal to new of test main. So what happens, these default values 10 and 20 would be replaced by 18, 8 and 99 in our new test main instance because these values get overridden. But in our second initialization, we do not declare any of these values, and what happens, these values now take up the default values. But in case of static, the value that was replaced by 10 as 88 would now hold the value 88 and not 10 because we use the keyword static. So this is the key difference between using static and not using static. The value of x is now common among all these variables. These are pretty much very useful in counting the values of all objects in a single variable. You'll be able to take note of the number of variables that are initialized. So in those cases we'll be using this static keyword. So let us try to print the values t2.x and we'll have t2.y. When I try to print this value, let's see what happens. Sorry, there's a spelling mistake here. So if I try to print the values of t2 now, as you can see, the default value of y is replaced by the value 99 because these are separate objects. But when it comes to static int x, what happens, the value 10 was replaced by 88 and now the static int x holds the value 88 and it keeps the value when a new instance of that class is created. So we're getting the value 88 and 20. So this is the purpose of static. So let us understand some common differences that are occurring between final and static. So final variable cannot be reinitialized. Static variable can be reinitialized. So this modifier final is applicable to both outer and inner classes, variable and methods. These are only applicable to inner classes, methods and variables when it comes to static. It is not necessary to initialize the final variable at the time of declaration, but it is necessary to initialize static variable at the time of declaration. A key point to note is method final cannot be inherited. Static method can only access the static members of the class and only be applied to other static methods. Final class can't be inherited by any class. The static class object can't be created and it only contains static members only. Final keyword doesn't support any block for initialization of final variables. Static block is used to initialize the static variables. Final local variables are allowed. Unlike C or C++, static local variables are not allowed in Java. So these are some of the differences between final and static. So in this video, we saw about what is final, what is static, and try to understand them using certain examples. Hope this video is helpful. See you in the next video. Thank you.